We should have some kind of music.
Interlude.
You know, to start the Graham Norton show, we should kind of come on and go, oh, listen, on tonight's show, in the news today, so-and-so has been making terrible whiskey, so-and-so has been making great whiskey. Hey.
We just try. We'll get Alistair in the background just singing along, just doing
that's right. Yeah.
Hum. That would work. For sure. Whatever guest we've got, make your own theme tune.
Yes.
Right, guys. Welcome to another Blether with. Glad to be back. This is my first time back in the seat for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. That's been
missed over last week, I was devastated.
On the Thursday night, because the time that we were back with Kenny on the Wednesday, and then you missed Ollie last week, which was a
great chat. I watched it back afterwards. I watched about 90% of it, which was really good, really nice guy. So delighted that he came along and had a chat with you. So.
Absolutely.
What are you drinking tonight? What's in your glass?
Well, unfortunately, I'm kind of behaving myself for a wee bit. So I've got a nice mug of black coffee here, and this was a mug that was given to me by my former colleagues in my last job in the NHS, which says my level of sarcasm has just reached a point where even I don't know if I'm joking or not. So that was what my old job was like. I mean, it's not quite as bad this time around. And,
are you sure?
I don't know. We'll wait and see what kind of mug I get for you guys for my Christmas.
Yeah. Good evening, Phil. Good evening, David. David's bang on time. He was saying he got finished work early today, so
he's fantastic. Yeah,
a little bit earlier, which is
good
great.
Have you been bored, David? We've been missing you for the last couple of weeks.
I know. He's a busy man.
He is indeed.
Busy man. And soon to be trying one of these. This is our latest, so I'm just about to open this bottle.
It's in a tube, is it?
It's coming in a tube this time, yeah. I think they're saving cardboard with the tube.
So that's new packaging for Octaves then for Duncan Taylor.
Yeah. Cool. I got a wee surprise when I opened it because I haven't seen them in the tubes yet. I knew they were changing, but I didn't realise it changed. So the bottle's still good.
I think I maybe prefer that. I mean, I did like the old ones, but it always worried me a little bit with that kind of pull open bit that the bottle's going to fall out. I used to get quite anxious with it, but yeah.
So it'll be easy for you to pack as well.
Yes, indeed, absolutely.
So for those who didn't see, this is a Coldrain, which is unpeated Ardmore, or Ardlair or Ardless, depending on who you ask what it is. And it's finished for 4 months in a sherry octave. I think it's 4 months. Yeah, 4 months in a sherry octave.
So is that a slightly different finish from the last one? Was the last one?
The last one was 3 months, I think.
3 months, yeah.
Well,
this is as chocolatey as the last one then.
12-year-old, yeah. So that's how we know that.
That's a lovely little gluggy sound going on there as well.
The pop and the blood of the first dram is outstanding. So just arrived today. We weren't actually expecting it to arrive today because we had a whole thing for our other exclusive, Murray McDavid, Laphroaig, which arrived today, and it was launched. And then as soon as the email went out, this arrived. I was like, oh, we could have done it both at the same time, but we've just kind of tagged on two. It's like buses. Two came at once. Looking forward to this one. It's a wee bit stronger than the last one we had, which was 10 years old. This is 55.3. Coincidentally, the last one was 53.5. So
you're saying Laphroaig. According to Robin Lang, Laphroaig sounds like a snake choking on a fish bone.
It's one of these distilleries. It sounds different every time I say it.
I think you want to go up to the area and sort of pick a fight with some of the locals, but I think we're thinking maybe Arthrusk. We'll see what our guest tonight has got to say on the subject. Maybe he's got.
It's called. It's not the Coldrain, is it? It's a different distillery altogether.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be enjoying this tonight. So hopefully some of the guys who are watching will be getting a bottle soon. I don't expect it to last very long. There's only 86 bottles of it. So
keep a wee dram or two for me, Mike.
I will do, yeah. But like you, I am being sensible. I'm driving tomorrow morning, so got to be sensible tonight. But so let's bring in the guests. Let's have a wee welcome for Alistair Longwell. Good evening.
Good evening, Alistair.
Hi, fellas. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Very
Yourself?
good.
Good to see you. That's a really interesting bottle. Then Ardmore, or finished in sherry. That's a new twist even for us. We've got nothing maturing like that. So
Really? Well,
yeah.
I'll have to send you down a dram then.
Well, you can make a bottle if you want.
I was about to say that's a bottle he's after.
It's 3 or 4 drams before you start to settle into a rhythm. So
you were good to us at the academy, so
I was going to say Alistair's a good friend of ours. Surely he's getting a bottle, for goodness sake.
absolutely.
yeah. I used to drive. I don't drive past it quite so often, but when I was at Ardmore full time, I used to go boat a brig and up by a frisk every day.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've heard a million different
Yeah.
pronunciations.
They changed it to Singleton to because
It was the original Singleton, yeah, because people couldn't pronounce it.
Yeah. Well, I remember I've heard my dad, God rest his soul, try to get his tongue around it a few times. Said, "I just call it a Singleton Fader. It's a lot easier."
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks for inviting me along. I had a wee look at some of the previous ones, and it's a great wee blog you've got going here.
It's a good laugh. We love it.
Yeah.
Just an opportunity to speak to guys about themselves, and we'll delve into the whiskey, of course. But it's more about the people in it than the product, because people can buy a bottle and have it in their home or in a bar or whatever, but they don't often get the chance to speak to guys like yourself. So we love to have you on, and we love to kind of find out what makes you tick. So thinking of what makes you tick, what's in your glass tonight?
I've got a wee cheeky Ardmore 20-year-old.
Nice.
I'm chasing it with some diluting juice because it's been a long day at work. But
sometimes you need that thirst quencher, don't you?
Yeah. Yes.
So is that who bottled the Ardmore you've got? Is it distillery bottling?
I bottled it myself. It's a pucker quality sample from our own 20-year-old bottling that we did a couple of years ago, which you may have seen came out. Some of it went onto the old interweb, and some of it just through kind of stockists. Yeah, it's a second fill bourbon mixed with first fill bourbons. I think that works really well when you're working in bourbon. You don't want to put too much wood in.
Sure.
And that kind of age, you're in that range. I think Ardmore, between kind of 14, 15 to 20 is the optimum age when it's in bourbon wood. So it's a fine dram, and it's really quite cheap as well if you go and look for it.
Yeah. Because often the one you see is the legacy, isn't it? That's the one that kind of most people will have tried or have seen in the shelves and things.
Yeah, and legacy is an interesting one. I mean, you've got that Kildrain, which is, as you say, is Ardless, as it's known. We call it Ardlair because the distillery is in the parish of Ardlair, but that's fundamentally Ardmore with no peat. And legacy is 80% standard Ardmore, through its standard maturation. And then you're putting in 20% of Ardlair, which has been in first fill bourbons, and Ardlair really is a classic Speyside style. So it puts a bit of a different character into Ardmore Legacy. It's a very approachable dram, but it's still got that punch of the Ardmore peat, but it's got a bit of the finesse of a good sweet floral Speyside in there as well. So
it's lovely.
It's a great deal. It's not a challenging price point. So it's a good entry level dram and get people hopefully into into whiskey, and then from there they can move in any direction they want. It's a really good starter. You can keep going up the gears in peat, and we've got the drams to do that, or you can go across in the Speyside and into Highland and try a whole range of different drams.
You kind of got under the Suntory banner. You've got the Beam Suntory banner. You've got quite
a lot of peat.
Great mix, don't you? You've got probably Auchentoshan in the Lowlands as another entry level kind of dram, and then Glen Garioch and Ardmore in the Highlands, and then over to Islay you've got the kind of peat, kind of intro to peat with Bowmore, and then the peat
monster.
You've got Destination Laphroaig, but you've got Bowmore is an incredibly interesting dram. Even for that level of peat, It's really balanced nicely. You know, don't get me wrong, Laphroaig's got immense sweetness, and depending on what cask you put Laphroaig into, you can really play tunes on it. And obviously, the older it spends time in the cask, it starts to soften some of the more aggressive phenols. But Bowmore's, it just changes. It just changes through its maturation, and certain ages you get really pronounced kind of tropical fruit flavor starting to come in, like the kind of 20 years plus coming through, and it's just amazing. It's just how it morphs and changes, And Auchentoshan, it's one I was kind of familiar with. I'm originally from Glasgow, so it was a well-known dram at the time. It was owned by a local guy when I was growing up, so been in about that a few times. And again, triple distilled allows you to do different things with it. The last year or 2 years ago, the release with, dare I say it, a Chardonnay cask finish. You go, oh my God, a whiskey should never go near a cask like that. Well, if you've got the right whiskey, it actually really works.
Yeah.
You're not going to stick, a Highland Park or a Macallan or a Glen Garioch into it, but with Auchentoshan, it's just perfectly balanced to take that in. So it's good. We have got that variation in the range, and then outside of Scotland, obviously we've got a fair degree of punch across Canadian, Japanese, Irish, and of course our big boys in bourbon. So it's a really interesting portfolio.
So for the guys at home, what's your role within the company? What is it that you're kind of tasked with?
Distillation. My current title is Head of Distillation and Environment. So I've kind of taken in the environment brief because most of our environmental objectives are pretty much focused in and leaning into our distilleries, because that's where the energy demand is, the primary energy demand, the carbon, and of course the water. So a lot of what we're focusing on doing in the coming years is within our distillation estate. So as we look to build on the existing quality, we're also looking to build in sustainability. So the two parts of the job marry really nicely. That's something I'm quite passionate about anyway. Going back, I'm very interested in that, isn't it? Yeah, it is. And the trick with us is how to do it whilst maintaining and then ideally enhancing spirit quality and not impacting on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sounds like, have you always worked in distilleries, Alistair? Has it always been there?
Not always malt distilleries. No, I started with teachers in Glasgow 1987, a long time ago.
Just a boy.
August the 10th, 1987, with teachers who were, one of the really big names and independent names in whiskey at the time, and the kind of, I guess the most famous of the Glasgow whiskey firms. And at that point, they were owned by Allied Lyons, which was a UK business. So there was brewing in there. There was Allied Tetleys at Alloa and things like Lyons made cakes and Tetley tea. But the whiskey arm was still very much run by independently by the family. So it was an excellent business to join. It was local to me. I grew up in the north side of Glasgow, and Springburn is where teachers had their bottling operation, and the headquarters were in St Enoch Square. So those of you who have been in Glasgow or maybe wandered down Buchanan Street by Fraser's, you get to Argyle Street and you walk over and there's a wee subway station, St Enoch's subway station there. On the left-hand side, you've got the St Enoch Centre. If you look to the right, at number 10, number 12, St Enoch Square, you look up, you still see teacher on the outside of the building, because it's a listed building. Yeah, it's just a wonderful place,
Yeah.
And it's done in the old style. The boardroom where the directors used to meet to do the tasting, it was all Rennie Mackintosh. It was just a beautiful place.
Do you still have the teachers on the side of Ardmore? Don't you still got that big as you go past on the train?
You've kind of got to be on the train or living in one of the farms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess people don't really appreciate quite often that there's where some of the distilleries are in Scotland. You come across gems, but Ardmore's been there since the late 19th century, 1898. But it's right on. It's literally lipping onto the railway. So unless you're going by on a train, you never see it. And she's a big distillery as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, we had a discussion a couple of weeks or a couple of guests ago. We were talking about which distillery. If money wasn't an object, whatever.
Right,
What distillery would you buy? So Ardmore would be my
This was
choice.
Kenny, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Aye.
I would love it. The spirit there is great, and if you get a single cask of it, and it's flexible as well, goes into a lot of different wood, and obviously the amount that you can produce is fantastic as well. Everything on site, the great warehouses, and it's not far away from my house as well, so that always.
Well, this is it. You can get there quite quickly.
Absolutely.
that would seal the deal for me.
And I guess that was the fun bit when Ardmore was built, like most of the distilleries in the 1890s, really to furnish blends. Teachers were a blending house.
Yeah.
And Ardmore was built to provide that peaty backbone, but the level of peating is very accessible, 12 to 14 ppm. So it's not really in your face. And it's Highland peat, so you're not getting that iodine hit either. And you guys know you've really got to get it in the mouth or add a little bit of water to release it, because it can carry still a lot of the Highland malt, the maltier flavours, the sweeter flavours, and then you get that kind of background hit in the smoke. So it is flexible and it's designed to go in a blend, which a lot of single malts can't do, because it's stronger, more robust flavours are just too powerful sometimes to go into blends. Great single malts all over Scotland, but you can't really blend with them, so yeah.
Do you think that there's a danger now with a lot of these new distilleries coming through are primary or only focused on single malt? Your Ardmore, your Daft Mills, your Lindors, and that. Is there a danger that the blends are under threat from single malt, or is there still enough?
No, I don't think so. I think it's great to see the proliferation that's happening now in the industry. It goes back to the 1890s, when 30, 40 odd distilleries were built in Scotland, and Mr. Doig was a very busy man in his Elgin office designing them all. Now we've seen that in the last 10, 15 years, that the great expanse of distilleries all across Scotland. I think that's a really good bit as well. The length and breadth, east to west, north to south, on the islands, and I think there's a place for that range of flavours. The blends will be fine, because the big blending houses have been putting the money into the core distilleries, as you know. So the fingerprint malt distilleries have all been expanded or getting expanded. So that's keeping pace. What we have got now, on the back of blends opening up some of the foreign markets, you're creating the opportunity for malts to go in. And then sometimes it's vice versa, but normally it's you get the blends in there first, and then people start to move up through the gears, So I think there's definitely a place for both, and I think they're not mutually exclusive at the moment.
It's almost like the other way around here. People tend to go more into the single malt, and then it's then persuading them that blends actually, there's that snobbery within whiskey in Scotland a little bit, that I'm not going to drink a blend. I always have a laugh with the whole idea of an age statement. Somebody says, I only drink single malt, I'm not going to drink any blends. I think, well, yeah, but your 12-year-old's a blend, technically. So, and there's that kind of argument, people just want doing it. It's just a snobbery thing.
There's a bit of snobbery. There's also a bit that the industry needs to put their hands up and say, do you know what, we weren't really looking after blends. We weren't caring for blends. We weren't engaging with consumers and telling them. I mean, you met Gordon Grant. He's just retired at Ardmore. He's now hanging around the distillery again, doing some more work. Gordon's an old teacher's boy like myself, and he a wee leaving do that Forsyth gave us all a nice wee bottle of Royal Highland. So that's a 12-year-old teacher's blend. Beautiful, And you've got wonderful drams. All our competitors, Chivas, Johnny Walker Black, pound for pound, you get much better than that. I know it's a vatted malt, but hey, you can do great things with a palette of flavour. But in this country, I guess the price was going the wrong way for us from a taxation. So people were moving the better blends abroad where they could maybe get a premium. And then there was a whole thing about, my father drank that, I had a whiskey once. I was 14, at a party, and somebody gave me a bottle of blah, blah, blah. And I was sick the next morning. I'm not touching it again. And, most of us probably had that experience at some point.
Yeah. That's when you were scooping it, wasn't it? You weren't thinking about.
And I guess in the old days, malts weren't so readily available. They weren't really popular. So people cherished their blends more, and there was a much greater affinity to a blend as well. And because there was demand, I think whiskey firms put a lot more work into it. Whereas I think we just got a bit blasé about it. and just left it to die and wither in this country. It's certainly not that way abroad. The consumers abroad are much more switched on to blends, much more aware of the benefits of blends, and will play with a mixed palette of Scotch. They'll have their favourite malts and they'll have their favourite blends, and it'll be about what occasion they want to drink in.
So do you think that's improving in this country now? I mean, certainly Mike and I we promote blends all the time, but do you think that's in general in the industry? Do you think it's going back in the right direction again?
It's hard to tell for me, because when you walk into the major grocers now, it's fantastic to see the range of malts, and then you've got a huge range of foreign whiskies, but you've only really going to get 3 or 4 blends, so the choice isn't there, and it tends to be more of a value choice. And most people do their shopping in the Tesco's, unless they're going to a place like you fellas, and going into a place which has a range of good quality blends and has people there who can talk them through it. Because we're at the point now where we need to educate people in blends the way we had to educate people in malts 10, 15 years ago, because there's not an awareness of it. So it needs a bit of focus, because you're not going to change consumer minds. But a lot of people, as you say, just want to go in. I want to see what I can get. 12 years old, the cheapest, what's on the shelf. I'll take that. Or I've heard of that one. That must be good. I'll walk away with that. And the awareness of, the teachers, as I say, was doing 1 million cases in the mid-70s in the UK. 1 million cases.
Wow.
It was ubiquitous. And then you had, you had your Bells and you had your Grouse and White Mackays. All these guys were doing plenty, but I think we just got a bit blasé about it. And then taxation didn't help in this country. It just became too expensive to buy a bottle of blend. You're going for probably the cheaper stuff. I won't name brands, but you know what I'm talking about. You can get stuff at fairly low prices, and the quality reflects the price you pay.
Absolutely.
We've got a couple of questions coming in from guys. We've got Phil Dixon asking, we spoke a bit about Ardmore. Glen Garioch, he's asking about the work that has been going on there, about £6 million of investment, I think. Was the figure.
Absolutely.
So how do you see the output developing in the future of Glen Garioch?
Well, we're not going to increase production. What we've done is we've invested that money to do effectively 3 things. One, to ensure that we can run the distillery at its optimum production level in the right way, without cutting corners and chopping and doing things a bit quicker. Mm-hmm. So at the moment we've got no plans to expand or beyond our current capacity, which is like 1.35 million litres a year. The second thing we were close quarters was to return the distilleries back to the way we used to do things 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Our parent company Suntory are extremely passionate about this, and they made us very passionate about it in Scotland as well, about the benefits of doing things in a more traditional way, which gives us an opportunity to get as much flavour into the new make spirit as possible. I'm not saying that what we're making before or what we're still making at other sites and other people are making is poor quality. It's, you don't really get bad whiskies in Scotland, but there's an opportunity to actually just look to the past and say, okay, when we use this and we use that, and compare matured spirits and say, what's changed, and can we replicate that but with a modern twist? Because we can't go back to the inefficiencies, we can't go back to the high carbon way. So what we want to do is get our distilleries back making, using as traditional processes as possible to impart as much flavour into our spirits. So at Glen Garioch, as you know, you guys have been, Floor Malton's just reintroduced at the start of this year. Last year we brought direct firing back into the wash still. I won't tell you what we're doing in yeast, but that's this year's project. So can we talk next time he's along? We'll be able to talk about yeast and make sure we've got the right amount of vessels to give us what we want from a fermentation profile as well. So clearer water, longer fermentation, direct firing, the right yeasts, which we can talk about another time, and floor malt, and all these things contribute to making the best spirit. And then obviously you're looking at good quality warehousing, and as you probably noticed, we've spent a lot of money in the warehousing as well. Traditional Dunnies warehousing, but making sure that the roofs are done and the warehouses are tight and are dry, and we've got good quality casks. So you give you give the output of the labour of the men and women who work at the distillery the maximum opportunity to achieve its potential. That's really what we want to do, is allow our whiskies to get to their absolute maximum potential. So, long-winded answer of what we're doing with the output. The output is hopefully going to be enhanced in flavour. We're not going to make any more of it. We're just going to hopefully make it a little bit more like it might have been 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's very exciting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I quite like the kind of idea Glen Garioch we touched on non-age statements earlier on when Glen Garioch had the 8-year-old, and it struggled a wee bit because people looked at 8-year-old and thought, oh, it's too young, so they took off the 8-year-old and put on Founders Reserve, a nice fancy name, and now it's your biggest selling Glen Garioch dram. So it's
guys, listen, you can put whiskey in an average cask for 30 years. It's not going to make it any better.
No,
it's going to detract from it in actual fact. So
yeah,
it's about how you make it, the ingredients you use to make it with, and how you mature it. And age is a big part of it, yeah, but it's only a cog in that chain. And you can get wonderful flavours at a young age if you do things the right way.
But the age number, I mean, that, things like an 8-year-old, 6-year-old, people are beginning to feel that's okay. It's not going to scare people off anymore. It definitely would have done not that long ago. You've seen that number in bottles all over the place.
Yeah, the amount of times we've had people in the shop, I don't do anything under 15 years old.
Well, you've got a big wallet then, eh?
Yeah.
but it's also, I feel sad to hear that, because sometimes people are then not getting the best whiskies.
You just
you can murder a good dram by leaving it in the cask for too long.
Yeah.
There's a distillery. Rassie, we spoke to Alastair a few months ago. He was on the chat, and I'd been up to the distillery a couple of months before then and tried a whiskey, and it was 6 months old, in a Colombian oak cask, and I thought that was ready. I would have said that was ready. And what are you going to do with this now? You've got another 2.5 years to. I mean, obviously he knows exactly what he's doing, but I mean that whiskey was ready at 6 months, and to my palate, you're absolutely right. You could. There's a lot of good young whiskey out there that should be in bottles, and people should be getting a chance to drink.
Yeah, I mean, I working for a bigger firm, and when I started out, you got a wee bit jealous sometimes of some of the smaller firms, and Ardmore had never been sold as a proprietary single malt really until Beam got a hold of it in 2006, and they're coming over and asking George and I, what expressions have you got? And we make Ardmore, it goes into teachers, or we reciprocate it because we need 35 other single malts. All right, well, you guys have seen it. I've talked to you first. You need to go and find out what it all tastes like, and we got a bit of experimentation that way. But one of my best ones was out on the road over in the States doing a bit of promotion for Ardmore. And I think it was 2007 or 2008, and we were in Colorado, and doing what you normally do. They get you in nice and early, get their pound of flesh, training staff and sales guys, and then you do a whiskey show in the evening kind of thing. But I had like half an hour lunchtime, and Simon Brooken, who's our malts ambassador in the States, says, Jess Graber's place is just round the corner, Colorado whiskey. And I said, I'm going to drop in, go and see this guy. And introduce Blether the way. So what are you doing? And he's explaining. He was actually using barley. He was using a mixture of American-grown barley and Scotch malt. It's almost like an Irish pot. He was putting on malted American in. I said, this is great. He said, I know, I can do what I want. He said, nobody has a clue how to make whiskey over here. He says, I can do what I want. I said, all right. So what does it taste like? He said, come round here and taste this. And he got a cask, and I think it was 9 months. This stuff hadn't seen a full lunar year yet, and he put this stuff out, and it was kind of fairly pale. I thought, okay, it's young. He said, no, but try it. Right? I said, that's kind of funny. He says, what does it smell like? I says, peppermint. He went, yes, now taste it. And I tasted it, sure enough, it was, I can't swear on this, but it's peppermint whiskey. I said, how the hell did you do that? He says, I can't remember. He says, it was 9 months ago. I went through a couple of weeks of trying different stuff, and he said, I can't remember what I did with that. I wish I could remember. It was great. And I thought, bloody hell, 9 months old, I would have had a dram of that. Easy peasy. Easy peasy. It was just stunningly different. And I thought, this is the benefit of maybe breaking the shackles off a little bit as an industry and not being afraid to go and try a few things. There's a market for doing things consistently, and a lot of us will do that because that works. But there's also an opportunity to really just push the boundaries a bit, So I've got a lot of respect for the newer distillers who have a little bit more freedom to do some stuff like that. Although I'm quite happy with what we're doing with our mainstream distilleries. We're getting to play about as well, but yeah, you can get all sorts of flavours into a glass. The trick is to write down what you're doing when you're doing
That's
it.
not do when you've already had 7 or 8 drams, maybe.
That's good. I have to try and remember that story. We've got a few comments coming in. Jeremy, he's got a lot of love for the 1970s Glen Garioch, the 60s and 70s. But he's asking about Ardmore. How much change in the spirit has been made since the 70s?
In a lot of ways, no. Again, you fellas have been through a few times. You kind of know the lay of the land. Ardmore, it's still got the same still house. She's still got her cast iron mash tun. It's number 2. It's from 1969, but it's still a cast iron copper domed. Wooden washbacks. We've just put an R2 in, actually. Just commissioned them this year, so she's now got 16 wooden washbacks. The only fundamental change has been the move from direct firing in 2000. But a lot of work was put into that to try and replicate the kind of copper contact you would get with direct firing, which is Ardmore was probably one of the first distilleries to really run their wash condenser hot to get that copper erosion that you would get through the kind of the thermal effects, through the Maillard effects within direct firing. So, but this is how we've had our layer, because after we actually took 2 stills aside, connected them to a steam boiler, ran the condensers hot, put secondary condenser subcoolers in to give them, let's say, that ability to effectively erode copper in the wash condenser and then cool down through the subcooler. But after 4.5 months, Robert Hicks, our master blender, was quite happy with the way the distillation regime we got and the cut points. And we had 6 weeks left. And he said, okay, well, what can we do with 6 weeks? And that's when we put unpeated malt through this place for the first time. And it was just called Ardmore Steam. The first year we did it.
Ardmore Steam.
Aye, if you look in the cask and on our inventory ledger, that's what it's known as Ardmore Steam. We did a little bit the following year, and then because it was starting to mature nicely, we started to do a bit more, and then we gave it a name. We registered it as Ardlair, and we now reciprocate about 2 million litres of that a year. So most blends will have some Ardlair in it. It's a beautiful dram. Yes. But going back to the original question, what we changed? It's really only the means of firing, because every other bit of the process is exactly the same as it was 40, 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah. Have you got because you were fully peated on site until what, mid-70s, late 70s?
Our own maltings.
Yeah. Was it the maltings, or what was it that stopped on? Was it mid-70s? You stopped a big part.
Yeah, the site originally had floor malting, and then it moved in the 60s to Saladin boxes. There was 3 Saladin boxes.
Okay.
And I think 74 or 75. I wasn't on the ground at the time, but Gordon remembers because he lived across the road. And his grandfather was actually, his father worked at the still. His daddy was the engineer before him, but his grandfather was a head maltman. Wow. He came over from Glenfarclas in 1929 to become head maltman. So he came in, it was still the floors, and then it moved to Saladins. But we stopped that in the kind of mid-70s. As I say, Teachers was selling 1 million cases a year alone in the UK, plus what it was doing export. And that's when the still house was expanded from 4 stills to 8 stills. And at that point, even the most productive floors in the business would probably only given you about 7 or 8% of the mash bill. So it really wasn't worthwhile to sustain it,
Yeah. We've got, so Phil was just saying Glen Garioch was his first distillery tour 30 odd years ago.
Really? Well, he needs to come back because it'll
Yeah.
probably look
Yeah.
more like it
Yeah.
did than it's ever done in the last 20 years. Yeah, you'll go back and you'll see the flow and you'll see direct firing because it'd been direct firing back then as well.
I think I see there was a photograph of the Saladin in Ian's book. That I thought there was a photograph of the Saladin box in there, but there's not. I can't see it anyway.
No. I've got some images. I'll need to share them next time you guys are over.
Yeah.
I've got pictures of the Saladins. In fact, I've got a picture of Gordon's grandfather standing at one end, and he's at one end facing the camera, and then you've got a guy. All you see is his big flipping trousered bum in the air as he's trying to push the plough through it. But it's it's great to get the floor maltings back. That's just got 5 stills. And 3 of them have got their own floor maltings, Bowmore, Laphroaig, and now Glen Garioch, and it's it definitely, the levels we're putting in really does impart a difference into the character of the spirit,
So you're talking about 30% at Glen Garioch. Is that about the same level at Laphroaig and Bowmore as well?
She's actually only around about 22-23% at Glen Garioch, because we've actually, there's half a floor we couldn't get back because it's got a lot of our sustainability kit. Because I mean that was I never finished that story. I did a bit of a Billy Connolly. There was 3 things we've done at Glen Garioch, and one was obviously start the journey towards a more sustainable future. So it was a bit of a challenge for us. How do we reintroduce direct firing and things like floor malting and reduce water footprint and reduce energy footprint? So working with Forsyths, who are our principal contractors, there's actually a really quite a novel heat recovery system where we take as much heat back out of the flue gases and the direct firing to give us the heat to pre-charge and run the kiln fans, etc. They're all done off a radiator banks. So, but a lot of that kit takes up one half of one of the original floors. So that was the payoff. That was the trade-off. But even at 22%, it's almost approaching a quarter of the mash bill. So it makes a significant difference. Bowmore's up at about the same level, and Laphroaig's just slightly less than 20%.
Okay.
But it's great. It's the only distillery kind of this side of the country where you can walk in and see the floor malting now, and I think it's going to be a great asset when we're now that we're open again and people are visiting. For the northeast, it's incredible to be able to go there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it's been a challenge, and it still is a challenge for the folk that are working it, because it was a beautiful building. It was just stunning building. That yourself from the outside, but it's an old building, so it's not a brand new shiny maltings. We've had to everything inside is new, but we've had to fit all that into a very old.
I just love how at the end of the school day you've got all the kids walking through between the still house and the warehouse, and it's just right in the middle of the road going through it.
Russell and I were talking before you came on here. We were just talking about dogs as we normally do, and it's just nuts. You get the Waynes going to school in the morning, and then you get the dog walkers going by, and then you get the Waynes coming back for school, and then you get the same dogs going back. It's just all manner of life cutting down Distillery Road.
Yeah, but no plans to build a greenhouse again and get the tomatoes.
Tomatoes are going to
go. No. And and all joking aside, I mean, it was a fantastic thing when it was there. It was very high profile, and it created a lot of a positive buzz. But actually, it negatively impacted the quality of the spirit, because the distillery, I think, became beholden to having heat generation at the right times to keep the greenhouses warm. So as a way of reusing waste heat, I think you would, if you were going to do it again, you would have to be very careful with the model.
Okay.
I think what we do at Bowmore is a lot easier. We just supply heat into the McTaggart Centre to heat the swimming pool. So they take what they can take, and then they just top it up. Whereas the tomatoes needed heat at a certain time. So I think that was a bit of a struggle. And Digger, he remembers it well, and a few of his family worked in there as well. So it was tough going.
I think that's one thing that being Suntory has in almost all its distilleries. I've never been in Auchentoshan, but I get the feeling that there's a lot of family connections all the way through. And I suppose a lot of distilleries are like that. But I think you're just talking about Ardmore there and Glen Garioch, 2 examples. The generational thing is pretty special as well there.
Yeah. I mean, it came home to me one time. I must be about 10 years ago. There was a lad, Dougie Lewis Gartley, retired, and I was sitting there, and his father actually worked at the still before him. Raymond came over from Canada during the Second World War. Oh, that's Gordy.
Let's go and say hello.
And I'm sitting there, I'm going, well, I'm saying cheerio at this fella, we're getting a wee speech, and I thought, this guy started work at Ardmore 3 months before I was born. And at the time I was handing over these gifts and shaking his hand, I had 27 years service.
Yeah.
You know, that's how long this guy had been working there. And his father had been there before him. Then Gordon had just popped in there. We've mentioned Tim Gordon's father, his grandfather, and you get that. And then it's the same in the Stills and Island, and also Digger's dad. You know, finding out in spring. You know, you've just got these wonderful stories going back over generations, and that's what makes distillery special. There is no industry like it. Right?
Absolutely.
For those of us that are attached to them, that work in them, that get to go and visit them, we're just so lucky to have an industry like this. You know,
that's one of the questions I was going to have, and those questions kind of coming up. But just what's the journey been like for you? You know, through the industry and meeting all these people.
It's been wonderful. As I say, I went straight from school as an engineering apprentice at Teachers in Glasgow. Through the first bit of consolidation, the Teachers owners actually bought Hiram Walker from Canada, which was Valentine's, and then Long John came in with Laphroaig, and then before you know it, we had this mixing pot of it was called Allied Distillers, some great whiskies. But I was down and I worked in primary down the road, so we so I finished my apprenticeship, and then it was in the kind of drain and fill and maturation down at Dumbuck with the geese, the Roman geese. That was great. Everybody wanted a goose egg at Christmas, but bloody hell, these things could bite, you know. And got to work with some really good people. So Jack Gowdy and Robert Hicks were the master blenders, looking after, as I say, Valentine's, Teachers, Long John, Black Bottle. They were all part of the portfolio. Great blends, as well as some really stunning, but probably underplayed malts. You know, they weren't really doing much with Laphroaig. They had a bag, and then said, "Oh, we can't have two single malts from Islay," so they mothballed it. You know, which is it's probably the best thing ever happened to it, because you know it's been well looked after by its current owners. But there was all these wonderful Speyside stills. I mean, when I went up to Milton Duff in 2000 to work at the tech centre there, you know, we had Ardmore, we had Glen Garioch, Glen Garioch over at Brecon, Glendronach, Glentockers, Imperial, Laphroaig, Milton Duff, Scapa. Scapa's a wonderful distillery, great spirit, you know.
Yeah.
Tormore, which is obviously just passed hands again to Elixir.
Yeah.
And great characters. John Black was at Tormore when I started. He was a bit of a mentor for me. We get time to tell stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what we're here for.
so my career, so I'd been in kind of drain and fill maturation through most of my career up until I was kind of 30, and I just really wanted a change. We had a grain distillery at Dumbarton, but I fancied a job came up in the malts, and I thought, I'm going to go for this new millennium, new start, something fresh, you know. And moved up here to Lossy for 2 years, and 22 years later I'm still sitting here. And I'd only been down for 5 days at Milton Duff, and they said, "Can you go down to Tormore? There's a chap there, John Black. He's going to look after you and give you a bit of an induction." I said, "Sure." And I've driven past that a couple of times on my way up the road to go for job interviews, and as you know, it's a stunning site. You know, it's even better when you're in the PD Road on the other side. If you're coming up for Granton up to Macando, and you look up from the other side of the space, it's just
you see the whole
see the whole thing. Anyway, so I went there. It's like 7:45, chat the door. Caroline, John's wife, opened the door. So, "Come on in, son. You want a wee cup of tea and a bacon roll?" I was like, "Yeah, that'll be fine." So I'm in the kitchen having a bacon roll, and I can hear this funk, and I kind of crane my head out the window, and there's John, right, bag of golf clubs, set of tees, and he's just hitting balls. Now, that doesn't sound too nuts, but when you look out for Tormore, all you see is 120-foot tall conifers, right? They're just dense, thick as spruce, you know. So what the hell's this guy up to, just hitting golf? This guy must get paid too much. This guy's just losing golf balls every morning for exercise. So finish the thing, and he comes in and says, "Right, how you doing, Alistair? I'm John, blah, blah, blah. Go on, I'll take you. First thing first with a distillery, son. This is the first thing you learn is it's all about your water. So we'll go up to the water source. I said, aye, fine, okay. And there's a lovely wee path up. It's all topiary trees. There's the shape of stills and bells, and there's even a ruddy one which we can't talk about. But when you get further around, you would see it. And we get up, and beyond that, it opens up, and there's a dam, and there's a beautiful kind of stone carved kind of cupboard and a wee wooden door. And so John opens the door up, and he brings out a dip can. He says, "You get some water." He says, so I'm pulling some water in, and he's got the glasses out, and out comes a bottle of 12-year-old Ardmore. I'm thinking, oh, you beauty. 9:30 in the morning, here comes the morning dram, and it was just stunning. But it's on the way down from that back to the distillery, my eye get kind of caught over, and I saw through the gap in the trees, and there was like a wee meadow, and he had 3 holes set up, and there was a flag in each of these 3. There was one at 120 yards, one at 150 yards, and one at 180 yards, and it was just covered in balls. He says, aye, I'll pop them out at lunchtime, he says. And I thought, thank God for that. I thought this guy was just hitting balls for the sake of it, but that was a lifestyle. That was John. He was just an old style manager, and incredibly nice fella, whose father had been the manager at Cardew, and John had still retained his malting shoes, his canvas shoes he wore when he was 14. And for those that were lucky enough to visit John in his house in Forest, I took my father in one day. He was up visiting. My dad collected whiskey miniatures, and we took him out upstairs, and John showed him his collection, and it was just, So, Dad, we need to go now. It's 2 hours we've been in here. We need to enjoy these dinner. Come on, So it was just the company was full. The industry was just full of characters. You met some wonderful guys and girls, people that had spent lifetimes in it, people that come into it fresh and forged careers, and you pick little bits up. You pick little bits up from everybody, and hopefully learn a bit.
That's what I love about it as well. Is no matter how much you know or think you know, you'll find some either technical aspect or a story like that about a character and stuff, and it just opens a whole new kind of love for it, doesn't it? It's always evolving that.
But it's a great industry, and we're a very open industry at this end. I mean, even just last Friday, we had a Malt Distillers Association technical visit up to Glenfiddich. Stuart Morrison and the team up there took us in to see the new extension. It's just stunning. On a different scale from most distillers, and also the grisson bit at the back end where they're doing, biogas generation, and that's the kind of thing you don't get in a lot of industries. Who opens their doors to bring their competitors in to let them see,
show them what they're doing,
and then answer the questions you've got. So you go there and you learn a bit, and then you go to the next place and you learn a little bit, and you keep the thing moving. You keep stealing with pride, I think's the way they call it nowadays. But you learn a little bit and you use it, and then hopefully somebody comes to you and you pass a bit of that on to them. And that's what keeps us going as an industry. And because Scotch is under pressure as well. We're not just competing with ourselves. We're competing with everything that's off our shores. Irish is booming again. American whiskey is booming. World whiskey. Australia's got nearly 30 distilleries now. It's
like that. Yeah. There's so many new. Sweden and all these guys are producing. I was going to ask this when we're talking about that kind of. We spoke about new distilleries and how they're like play and experiment a little bit, but there's also these guys like McNiga using cherrywood or elderberry wine cask and things like that, which we are not allowed to use in Scotland. Do you think is that a good thing that we don't use it, or is it something we should maybe open up to?
You'll get a different answer from me depending on what kind of mood I'm in. It's like I don't know. It's like the dog chasing the farm car, right? Chasing your car off the farm. The minute you stop and it actually gets you, it doesn't know what to do with it. So I think as an industry, we take great protection, and we take validity of the quality of our spirit from the fact that we are strictly defined. And if you're buying Scotch single malt, it's within those parameters. You know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So to complain too much about being constrained, if only we could do a bit of that, and then you go and do it, and you know what, it's not particularly good. All of a sudden, you're devalued your whole premise. So we have to be careful. I think there's scope for distillers to do a lot of things, but we just need to be careful what we call it.
Yeah.
And there's people doing great things with rye again, and all sorts of different cereals and different yeast strains. We just need to be careful what we call it. That's all. You just don't badge it up. Personally, I think we need to just dial it back a bit from the wood. It's just getting a wee bit ridiculous now. There's only so much you can do with wood. We should never lose sight of primarily making a really good spirit first.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Let the spirit talk for itself. Don't murder it with recycled MFI wood board. Whatever.
MDF.
Yeah, but I might give you a different answer. If you ask me this in a nice warm day, if I'm sitting outside enjoying somebody else's whiskey,
finishing up whatever cask. Yeah, absolutely. I can't hear the word elderberry without thinking of Monty Python. By the way, it just kind of straight. I was sidetracked there, so I had to go and look up the quote again. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelled of elderberry. Every time I hear the word elderberry, it just takes me away to.
One of movies, great assumptions.
Talking about wood and maturation. I mean, again, Mike and I we sing from the same hymn tune a lot of the time, really, actually, and we're absolute lovers of just a straightforward American oak, ex-bourbon maturation. Even without the sherry influence or anything like that. And we sing that tune all the time. A whiskey that looks like white wine, and it's got all that beautiful tropical coconut creaminess about it. It's just something to behold.
Absolutely. That was one of the you read all this stuff, and a lot of it, most of it is just marketing gumph. We found this cask, or we found, but we literally did after Beam took over, because most of what was in Ardmore was destined. It was all destined either going into the blend or going for reciprocation. But we did have a parcel of casks which were running about 20 years old by the point when Beam took over the distillery, that had obviously been, they were in possibly even in second fill, so we're talking about spirits that had been distilled probably early mid-80s, when there was a bit of a shortage of casks and people were reusing casks. So I say second fill, hey, some of them might even be a third fill, who knows? But it obviously not made the grade for going into the blend and been set aside, and it was literally stuck at the back of the warehouse. And we got those casks, and they were pale as straw after 20 years. But boy, the flavour in it, and half of it we got bottled out at 30 years old, which is one of the reasons they sent me out to the States to try and sell some of it, which it did all by itself. And then the rest are still sitting in the corner. Now, we've subsequently transferred some of it into first fill bourbons to put some body on it, but it's just so delicate, and you start to get flavours which you don't normally get when you start to put wood finishes on. You start to get these really rich coconuts, and you get the zingy kind of lemon zest and the citronella, and even the peat starts to morph. It's no longer kind of peaty. It's almost like a how do you say? It's more like a kind of chewy, like a kind of orris kind of root kind of stuff going on. And you think, whoa, we wouldn't have got that if you stuck that in a first fill bourbon. You'd have had a right good dram, really nice dram, but you wouldn't have got this. So I think there's more you can do with the wood rather than just what the previous contents were. It's what's the age of the wood? How deeply charred has it gone? It doesn't all have to taste a vanilla, bourbon, toffee, dark colour. Some of the best whiskies, as you guys know, some of the best whiskies are pale whiskies because the flavour's there. It's not been dominated. It's not been shackled by anything.
We've got Jeremy. Jeremy Watts here asking if that was the 1987 30-year-old that was released that you're talking about.
87? No, I'm talking about one that we released about 2009, 2010. It was a proprietary one. See, a lot of the age, I mean, most haven't got them out anymore, but most of them have. Ardmores are, Murray McDavis. Gord McPhail's the biggest chunk, because obviously done such a great job of keeping Ardmores. Can you tell us which?
It was he was looking for the 1987.
Oh, right, okay. I saw the distilled 87. So it's that, yeah. No, this is a previous one. I'm trying to think if I've still got it. I haven't got it to hand. There's one that came out. Would have been I'm trying to think. That came out at the same time or a year apart from the 20-year-old, the one I'm drinking just now. That's a different one. But it would have the same provenance. It will be a mixture, I would think, of first fill and maybe second fill bourbons.
Okay. Yeah, Jeremy just saying that was his birth year. And I think, did I hear you right when you said that was the year you started at Ardmore?
Aye, that's scary. Jeez. It's on my sleeve. 10th of August 1987.
There you go. So if you ever meet Jeremy, then you know he's he was born the year he started working.
A good year. What can I say, Jeremy? It's a very good year. Yeah.
There's always somebody born the year you started working.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I started working in 1982. What year were you born, Mike?
83.
There you go. I started working a year before you were born.
you guys started before me. I thought you were just pups, the pair of you.
I was born in 83.
Oh, you're born in 83.
I'm no pup, Jeremy. I'm no pup, Alistair. I've got a 40-year NHS career behind me.
Oh, you've done well to survive.
I'm sorry, absolutely. Whiskey helped, of course.
Well, Jeremy's hoping to get over to the academy in September, so you might get a chance to meet him then.
Yes, absolutely.
He's also asking about official Ardmore. Sorry.
No, sorry, I don't know if you guys are getting a bit it's a bit jumpy at mine, but I think it's just the reception here in Lossie. We've got nothing planned. Single cast is not something we ever did. We did one for these guys, September 10, the Lock and Key guys over at Julio's. Beyond that, it's not really something we've ever really done. It's maybe something we should consider doing with you guys, though, given that you're our local advocates. So it's maybe something we talk about.
Certainly keen to do that. Certainly keen.
Absolutely.
And I've still got this wee beauty as well. The
Stone Circle. Oh no, that one you have still got that,
yeah. No, you can't beat the centenary. And it says 12, and the funny thing was, Robert Hicks told me, he said it was actually 14-year-old to stock. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's done as 12, but it's 14-year-old bourbons. Aye.
So
again,
is there some 12-year-old in there that's taking it down, or?
No. I honestly, I think that it was bottled for us by Gordon MacPhail for the centenary, and I think all the labels were printed in advance. But then when Robert selected the casks, they were all 14-year-olds. So it's well, just put them in. Who's going to know? So, and again, it gets you into that I call the perfect spot for Ardmore and bourbon. That kind of 14 to 20 mark. It's just beautiful. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah. The peak's just at the right level there as well.
Yeah.
You've not managed to open your one yet either, Mike. I keep on looking at mine and.
No,
I've got one behind me here. I've got one in here, but I've got an open one downstairs. Yeah.
We'll need to buy another one next time we're up.
Yeah. No, it's just beautiful stuff. No, that's the intrigue about Ardmore. Beyond some of the independent bottlings, there's very little, official releases.
Yeah.
It's like the hen's teeth, and that was about the only one that was done up until Beam got a hold of the place in 87, and it's fairly limited. The only place you can really get it now is at the distillery.
Yeah.
So we've got Willis, another future Academy attendee.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Why does whiskey gain so much complexity as it gets older? There's a question for the geeks.
Do I get paid for this?
I was going to answer that one. It's the same as people. We all get more complex as we get older.
Oh boy, listen, I'm not a chemist, right? So, well, effectively, I mean, what does maturation do? We use oak, and we use oak for a good reason, because when we char the inside of the oak and break up the cellular structure of the semicellulose, you start to get things like vanillins and lignins and tannins, etc. But that's only one part of it. The reason we use oak is it will evaporate. It allows the cask to breathe outwards. and it can then breathe in inwards. So you've got three things going on. You know, you've got what's leaving the cask, you've got what's going into the cask, and that's the ambient air that's round about you, which is why you'll get different influences if you're in the Highlands of Scotland from you'll get over in the west coast of Scotland or on Islay or up at Orkney, etc. And then you've got that interaction, and the interaction bit is really important. It's going into those chemical compounds that have been created by the charring process. So that's helping you extracting some of those compounds out, which is going to give it colour and it's going to give it flavour. And depending on the type of oak, you know, if it's Quercus robur, if it's European oak, a bit denser, or it's Quercus alba, American oak, a bit more open, the in-drink will be deeper. And again, depending on how the tree has grown and the climatic conditions in which that tree has grown, the type of material that's in the oak itself will create different compounds. So there's a lot going on there. As well as taken from the wood, of course, the wood is also acting like a filter and it's things out of the spirit. So some of the more immature characters, the more sulphurous, heavy compounds will be drawn out, including some of the phenols, which is why the older a peated whisky gets, it generally gets a bit softer around the edges. So it's really a combination of the interaction with the wood, the expiration out through the casks, the inhalation of the external atmosphere, because it has to replace that. And of course, what the cask is effectively trying to do, or what the spirit's trying to do, is trying to get the same conditions in the cask as outside. So again, the type of warehouse you're in and the amount of available moisture. So you know the humidity of the warehouse is all important, because if you get high humidity, high water content outside, and the cask is obviously more spirits, more alcohol, it's going to draw more water, humidity in, and it's going to export more alcohol, which is why typical losses in the top of a Japanese warehouse or on top of the ricks in Kentucky, 5, 6, 7, even 8% in the really hot, humid. Whereas in a nice, cool dunnage warehouse at Ardmore or Glen Garioch, where it's bloody Baltic in the summer and it's still bloody Baltic in the winter, you know, it's a more even maturation. But that's why, you know, things like dunnage are really good, because you've got that nice damp floor, but it keeps it cool and it just keeps things going. So why does it gain so much complexity? Because you're given time for all these complicated interactions to happen. And if you've put as much flavour as you can into the spirit before it goes in the cask, and you put in a good quality cask in the right type of warehouse and give it that time, then you're going to build the complexity. The trick is to know when the optimum complexity is. You know, and there's some wonderful, really, really old whiskies out there coming out, but there'll also be whiskies that'll be overcooked and will have done too much work from the woods. That's the bit you need to be careful of. But ultimately, you know, it's just about getting the chemistry right. And you can only, you know, you can't really add more in the way of intrinsic distillation. You're only going to add in the flavour impacts from the wood or from the environment when it goes in there. So you have to have that really rich bunch of flavour in the cask to start with to give it the best chance.
I think Alistair's just down 2 bottles of Kildrain, Mike.
Sorry.
Do you have a favourite part of distillation, Alistair? I mean, or not distillation. Do you have a favourite part of the process? Is there a part of the process that you just absolutely love, or is it just just everything together?
To me, it's all about aromas. Okay, so yeah, you can walk into a Maltons and you just get that aroma. You can get it when you're outside. You can smell the germinating barley. You get that nice aroma. The aroma of an underbag to me is always special. The smell of wort, especially peated wort. I love peated wort. You can just breathe that in. Of course, you get nice aromas in a still house. You know, especially when you're just bringing in a still. If you're just bringing in a spirit still, and you got that lovely kind of apples and pears and high alcohols coming through. That's particularly nice. This isn't sexy, but one thing I used to love at Ardmore, and a thing I used to miss when she wasn't running, was the smell from the evaporator. Pot ale syrup. Used to get that in Glasgow as a boy, because Portland Distillery, which is up at the top of the city in the north side, it just washed down and it's Buchanan Street and Sucky Hall Street. You used to get that lovely, especially on a Thursday. I think they did something on a Thursday. I don't know what they did, but it was like beef crisps. Everybody in Glasgow wanted beef crisps because that's all you could smell. What's my favourite bit? I love all the aromas, but if I was pushed, it would be fermentation, because to me that's where the magic happens. That's when you really take the raw ingredients and you create the basis of your whiskey. You're making that beer, but ultimately, if the beer's not right, you'll never make good whiskey. So it's really important. Fermentation is really, really important. To me, that's where the magic happens.
It seems that a lot of the kind of new distilleries, that's what they focus on, isn't it? That fermentation.
Yeah.
You get the flavors into the spirit before it goes into the cask. So we're not relying on that long-term maturation. We can maybe get good quality spirit at 3, 4, 5 years old. That's the kind of element they focus on.
Totally agree. That's
we've got Juliet Buchan on. We recently celebrated her birthday.
She said she's on here. Oh, she was on. Oh, yeah. Okay.
She said you shared some fine drams together.
Yeah, we used to be neighbours, just we've short drive away from here. In fact, Juliet was on that trip to Glenfiddich. I was talking about with the MDAS. Her and Richards from Glenallachie were along for the trip. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Juliet's got a great range of whiskies, but we used to have a few good evenings sharing between the two collections.
I can imagine. So if there was a distillery that we talked about this earlier on, if there's a distillery that you could buy out with the Beam Suntory range, what would you go for?
Oh, that's a good one. I've never thought about that. Right, so I loved my time up in Orkney when we were rebuilding Scotland in 2004, and I do like Highland Park. My wife drinks HB sauce, Highland Park, and it is one of my favourite drams. But to me, Scapa was a special dram, and I knew that from when I started going up there. When you speak to the locals, all the locals in Kirkwall all drank Scapa. And I thought, why are they all drinking Scapa? Why is nobody drinking HB sauce up here? Because it's a fantastic dram, Highland Park, especially the 15-year-old. And I now understand why, because it is. I guess it's again water. The Lingro burn just comes right through the still, and it's a lovely light, clear water supply. And the spirit made it could be part because the lowland wash still. Again, it's just got allowing a bit more of the heavier flavours, but it's not phenolic flavours because it's not peated malt. So you get this beautifully sweet, malty. It's hard to put into. I just love it. I think it's a really, really good dram. There was a wee time when Allied had it and they launched it again. They relaunched it, and again it had 14-year-old on the label, but it was actually 16 or 17-year-old because there was a hole in the inventory. The guys from from Highland Park were coming down only once a year for like 3 weeks of the year just to do a wee campaign. So they were short of stock, so they were putting like 16 or 17-year-old in this. So everybody they knew was buying all this stuff up. It was just beautiful. And I think the last time I saw a bottle, and it was what's the name of the wee whiskey shop, Mike in Huntly? Not you and one, the wee supermarket thing. Aye, and he's got some really good stuff in there. Essence, that's it, isn't it? Yeah. One of the guys in the still, Fraser, said to me, he said, I think Essence has got some Scapa. I said, you're kidding. What's he selling that? Because by this time you can only get a bottle for like 240 quid or something like that, He said, I think it's only about 60 quid. So I actually got myself, the wife, my daughter in the car. We drove down to Huntly, and it wasn't. It was actually their new release. It was out for like 55. It's scaring. They did have the 16. It's actually 14. It was on the label, but it was 270 quid. And I thought, I can't justify that. No, I think I would go for Scapa. That would be my dram. As much for the place, actually. Have you guys been up to Orkney?
I've not been, no. Plan to go to Orkney fairly soon, actually. But
it's just a grand place. It's a lovely town. Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah, I've got friends in Orkney. Old family friends. My mum and dad go there quite a lot, but I've never been able to get up. But Talking about Scotty, they've mentioned Gordon Big Fail a few times. They have a 15-year-old that they release sometimes, a Scapa, which is absolutely outstanding. It's really nice.
It never lasts long.
Never lasts long, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, it was probably a naughty question. I hadn't really thought about that. There's plenty of good distilleries. You know, really good drams.
It's funny because Scapa comes up as a regular. You know, when we ask people that question, it does pop up as one of these ones that people think, yeah, that would be a nice.
I think it's because for so many years it's been in the shadow of its more illustrious neighbour, the other side of the bay. But yeah, it is loved and cared for by the locals, and if anybody drinks it, there's definitely a place for both of them. They both offer a completely different drinking experience, you know.
Yeah, you often find that kind of the I suppose never the star, but the backing kind of vocalists are all.
It's really Glen Scotia down in Campbellton. I mean, Glen Scotia is my absolute favourite, and I'm probably one of the few people in whiskey drinking population that's not that keen on Springbank.
That was the very first bottle of whiskey I owned, was a bottle of Glen Scotia.
Yeah.
Really?
I won it in a works raffle.
Really good prize.
I think I was only still 17. I was still only an apprentice, so I gave it to my father. So I'm going to go looking for it. It'll be somewhere in my mum and dad's house.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say Springbank then. I can quite understand, but it's nice to be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be with a bob or two now, eh?
It would be scary, yeah.
There we go. We've got the seeds of a revival in the Mull of Kintyre then, you know. So
absolutely
going in. So
Machnaharish and Dalriata. It's two distillery names that roll off the tongue.
Absolutely. Like Porton through and on Isla as well, isn't it? So,
yeah. It was all a bit quiet there at the moment. It was a lot of industry, and now it's been quiet the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, there's not much happening, so we'll see. Yeah. So, what about you guys? You guys must have seen a fair evolution over the years. What do you see as emerging trends? So, I know it's your show, and you're supposed to be asking me the questions, but what about you?
For in terms of whiskey that's getting bought, we see a massive influx on one on indie bottlers. There's a lot of indie bottlers out there now, and people are beginning to understand them, which was a big struggle, certainly pre-COVID, pre-lockdown, because a lot of our customers are buying for friends, family, presents. We're not a tourist destination, so a lot of our customers are locals buying presents or whatever. So the idea of Ardmore, for example, somebody's dad likes Ardmore. Can they buy an Ardmore? And I would be like, well, why don't you try this called Rain? It's from the Ardmore distillery, bottled by Duncan Taylor. Oh well, no, he just likes an Ardmore, and it's getting that idea of what an independent bottler is across. Yeah. So that, since we've reopened, I think going online through virtual tastings, and that has opened people up to different whiskies. So I certainly think the indies are kind of becoming more and more trusted with Joe Public and experimented with by the enthusiasts. For me, I don't know. You also, have you got any?
No, I would agree. I mean, I think one of the things that I've been in the shop 3 years now, so it's still all fairly new to me. But the kind of trend, I guess, that we almost have to manage is the trend for all the sought after bottles, which we never have to actually sell because they're all sold. So there's a bit of a shame where you can't, working in a shop and wanting to sell some stuff, you can't actually physically sell a bottle of Daft Mill to somebody or recommend it to somebody because there's never any to do that with. So there's so many bottles like that just go through our hands in a way, and that's definitely part of the trend. But the other one is, as Mike says, is trying to introduce people to different stuff. Yeah. And it is that kind of everybody's looking for Glenlivet, Macallan, Glenfiddich, and you're like, well, but what about Glenalchie's actually come on the go now? But that was actually a hard push to begin with. Obviously, they've won all their awards now, so it sells itself now as well. But there is that bit where people come in and just want an actual name, and you say to them, "This is an infrequent flyers, Craig Ellicky. Why don't you try that?" Well, it doesn't say. I see it says Craig Elgee down there, but it doesn't say Craig Elgee in big letters. So, yeah, but it definitely is the biggest thing for me in the shop's managing all the releases that everybody seems to want and trying to persuade people to kind of get interested in other stuff. But
yeah, we've got Matthew Runcie just commented there as well. So Matthew's got the online Aired Head whiskey, which is up kind of Fraserburgh area. He's finding a lot more people opening to blends.
Yeah.
And one of our biggest sellers in the shop is a Adelphi private blend. That's an outstanding drink. So yeah, in the sub £25 a bottle, it's a lot of people taking a punt on it and coming back for more, really enjoying it.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, and there was still some really good work going on in the blend space over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, John Glazer and Compass Box, some of their stuff's just beautiful. Really fairly simple blends, but they just got the knack right,
They do it well, yeah.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of the indie bottlers are now looking to do their own blend as well. I mean, you've got the guys at Lady of the Glen, Gregor and Paul, working away with their own blend. I think Kenny McDonald was talking about doing the same thing with Ardmore. So, but yeah, it's getting these kind of different labels out there. That was the thing that struck me when I first stepped foot in the shop. I knew a fair bit about different distilleries, and you think, okay, right. Well, there's a couple there I didn't recognise. And then suddenly, what's this stuff? It's an independent bottler. All right, okay. And there's a whole load of them. So, it must be baffling to some people, especially people who are buying a bottle for a relative and they don't drink whiskey. To see all that stuff and think, oh my God, I don't.
I suppose that's why they come to us.
It's our job to give them something we think or we believe that they're actually going to.
Yeah.
And I've never really had anybody come back yet and say that recommendation was rubbish. Most people come back and say that was amazing. What else shall I try?
They come back when you're not working, Russell. That's what it is.
Make sure that my brain flow's not here, because his recommendations are absolutely rank.
You've got a question from Janice there, Alastair, and it's one I would be very interested to know about as well. Ardmore Peatwood, the 12-year-old.
The Portwood.
Yeah, can we get our hands on that anytime or anywhere?
You were asking me last time we were speaking. I'll need to find out. They should be able to, because we're still doing a couple of thousand cases a year.
Right.
So I will need to try and find out. And if I do find out, Mike, Russell, I'll drop you a wee note and maybe you can put it out onto your blog. I don't know where it's going to be honest with you, because it's a great dram.
It's lovely.
Really nice dram,
It's,
I'm a fan of port with peat. I think it does work particularly nicely,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I shall scribble that down because I'd forgotten to ask the last time. Yeah.
Maybe we had other things to tend to when I spoke to you then.
Oh, indeed.
So we've got a question just coming from Dave, who's watching on YouTube. I think it's more directed at us. Just asking about the shop. Is the shop less busy with the cost of living going up? Yes and no. Our events and our tours and our kind of that side of thing is certainly picking up. The shop may be a little bit quieter, but online is still taken away. So what we've lost.
Tourism seems to be. I don't know if you're finding that at the distilleries, but tourism's picking up. And from my point of view, I've hosted a good handful of tastings recently with mostly overseas. A lot of Americans. I think I've done about 5 or 6 different groups of Americans recently, Belgians, Danes. So there seems to be a lot more tourists coming, and particularly to Aberdeenshire, which we want and we love, but it still surprises you. You still go, why are you here? I mean, you're welcome and thanks for coming, and I'll tell you where to go and to see and stuff, but because you expect everybody to go to Edinburgh on the West Coast, and we obviously want people to come to Aberdeenshire because there's so much to do and see here.
I don't think it was ever accessible previously with the cost of hotel, whatever, off the back. It was always filled out with the oil. Oil's not, it's still massive and all that, but it's not as ingrained into the group now. And hotels and B&Bs and these kind of places are finding that they have to attract other clientele and lowering the prices to attract tourists. And I think overall it's going to be great for the area, where we're not just an oil area that nobody travels because everything's expensive now. It's people are taking a gamble and come to us, as well as probably the fact that everyone who's been over to Scotland already have probably done Inverness, they've done Edinburgh.
Yeah.
We're the last corner that they haven't tried. So
having said that, most of the groups that I've been with lately, they've never been to Scotland before.
First timers,
and they've just chosen to come. I mean, some of it's to do with a bit of the golf as well. So
I think it's a really important point, though, Mike, because going back 10, 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago, probably, it was really difficult to get accommodation in West Aberdeenshire. You were almost out to places like Huntly before you could get a room. Some nights it was just ridiculous. The weekends were cheaper than the weekdays, so it was just the whole thing was skew with. So I think they probably are. The West Coast is still busy. A couple of runs up and down. I took the car the last couple of times. I took Hebe with me to Isla, and it's just hoaching. There's Rabbie's tour buses just everywhere you go. You kind of move and up in Verera and these kind of places for tourists, and they're all hitting the whiskey. But so it's really good to know that they're coming to the northeast, because there's some wonderful experiences to be had up here. Yeah. And it's not just whiskey. There's other things, but
you're up at Lossiemouth, and I'm an Aberherder, Alistair. So the coast, the Murray Coast, is just stunning.
Yeah, we've got a bridge open now, so you can go into the beach.
Well, there you go, absolutely. And we've got a humpback whale. Well, I think he's probably left now. He was hanging about in the Firth as well for a while.
Oh, and talking about visitors, I've got to tell you about this one. I couldn't make it down. I got down to Ardmore yesterday, but I couldn't make it on Tuesday. But we had a fantastic visit on Tuesday.
Yeah, I saw the post.
Paul and a few came over from Glen Garioch to help with it. But Roderick Smith, whose grandfather was the original Custom and Excise Inspector for Ardmore from 1898. I think Roderick must be well into his 80s. I think I wrote down his age somewhere. 83. So himself and his wife and his son came to visit, and I think that's just the kind of stories that just make your year when you get somebody who has, because we've got the portraits up in the distillery of the exciseman, and I always made a laugh of it. I said,
sitting in the same seat as his grandfather.
Well, actually, Gordon had found in previous times the old wooden seat. If you look at the portrait of the exciseman, they've actually got up, so I think he got to sit in his grandfather's seat.
Yeah, and then they had a photo of him in front of the portrait, sitting in the same seat.
Because I always had a great laugh, because you had the manager, Mr. Smith, and he was kind of fairly scruffy dressed, and most important person on the planet was behind him. It was a picture of Willie Teacher himself, and I say the bin was overflowing with paper, and his, as I say, he wasn't a particularly well tailored suit. And then you had the picture of the exciseman, and he was tickety boo with a gold fob watch and slightly aloof, and picture of the Queen behind him, his boss, Victoria. And I thought, just to have that human connection, it's just fantastic, And he was saying that to his father, who died, I think it was Christmas 1959, only ever drank Teachers because his dad's connection to Ardmore and Teachers, and they brought him back up and sprinkled his ashes in one of the streams feeding into the distillery. So it's just like, you just can't really make up these kind of things. They're just stunning. And if you can humor me for one more, it got me thinking, and I haven't brought this out for a long time. I actually have it in my computer bag. I took it with me. I take it with me whenever I go out on the road. This came into the distillery 2007, and I'm not probably won't transfer too well, but you'll be able to see there's an old bottle of Teacher. So that's like a 19 kind of 10 to 1920s, and then there's this chap holding this bottle. Right. This is a guy called George Boder, and he wrote to the distillery in 2007 just to tell us his story. And it's only one page, so if you can humour me for
absolutely,
a minute, I'll read out the thing. He says, "Hi, my name's George Boder. I was I haven't got my glasses on. I've got my fingers. I was born in Long Island, USA. My grandmother, who is part Scottish, had bought my father a bottle of this Teachers before he went out into the Second World War. he went out into the war and then never came back. He was out in the Far East, out in Guam or something like that. And the bit that really breaks it goes, it says, my grandmother used to keep the porch light on for 10 years after the war, thinking he might find his way home and find his way back to his prized bottle of Teachers. So every year, she died in her 1990s, and I've taken on the mantle of every year buying a bottle of Teachers and opening it at New Year and toasting my father. I know this is probably not of much interest to you, but it's just our family story and how your wonderful whiskey has made a mark in our life. And he says he's going to but he's not going to pass it on to anybody. He's going to take it to his coffin. He says, "No, that's a bit cheeky."
Empty, of course.
But I thought, how about that? For 10 years, this poor woman had taken out a bottle of Teachers, put it on the porch, and leaving the light on during the night, just hoping that light would guide her husband back. It's kind of these kind of stories. Whiskey does matter to people. It makes real connections,
It reminds me a little bit of the bottle of Glen Garioch that's on display. There was three friends or three brothers bought this bottle and they went off to the First World War, and they agreed they were going to open it when they came back, and only one of them came back and refused to open it, and years later the family found the bottle and donated it to the distillery, so it's still up there. But these great stories there.
Yeah.
One of the American groups that I was, they were staying at one of the castles just outside Inverurie, and it was four men that were friends all their life. They weren't related, and their children. So they decided they did a couple of trips to Scotland before, but their children had never been. Their children were now in their 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and this was their kind of take to. I think the women were away in Europe somewhere. But they were specifically going to be buying a bottle, and obviously we did a tasting with them, so they were looking at, well, this could be the one. But this bottle that they were definitely going to buy, this really good bottle, was going to be their basically their death bottle. So they were going to drink a dram of it. So whoever went first, the other three were going to have a dram, and then it was going to be the two, and then the last one would get to finish it. And that was. It sounds a bit kind of morbid, but actually, again, there's that kind of Scotch whiskey in particular has got that.
So it's such an important part.
It's such an important thing for.
You have to say, if you knew you were going to go with that pact, you'd have to get a dram.
Well, you'd have to grab the bottle and make sure you get a couple of drams.
You'd have to go through a mate to say, "No, you're not going yet. You need to get it." Oh, brutal. Some friends are
you're mucking about with a light there, so slowly disappearing in the dark there. So.
I was glad to see the sun's come out, because we had some fairly biblical rain about late afternoon.
We had it this morning, yeah.
It was late this morning. I woke up to the garden being kind of soaked, but I thought it was going to brighten up, and it certainly did. I was laughing to myself when you said there that it's Baltic in June at Ardmore, and I was like, well, I think we hit about 17 degrees today. So.
Oh no, outside's fine. It's just going into the warehouse. Aye,
it's inside. It's cool. That's right, absolutely. There's something absolutely amazing and special about Dunnage warehouses, though, isn't there?
Yeah, they're magical. They're just magical.
I was going to go back to this question. David Beer popped up. David was part of the academy that we managed to get a wee tour around Ardmore with you. He was saying the numbers on the doors of the warehouses were a bit odd, but you can't remember what.
Oh, aye. So starting left to right, if you come in, as you go down the close, it's 5, 6, 3. No, sorry, it's 5, 6, 3, 2, 7, 1. It's because the way they've been built. When they constructed the original distillery back in 1890, I think they built numbers 1 and 2, and they were freestanding. And then they built number 3, and then they built 4, and then they decided to fill in the gaps to build. So there's been in between the two originals with 5, and so you just end up with this total hodgepodge of numbers. So it flummoxes everybody, So they're down at number 5, but the rest of the guys are they're at number 1, and the rest of the boys are at number 4 over here. people just get lost wandering around the warehouses, you know. And
You number 5, other boys are next door at number 70. How's that?
Three's a bonny one. She's got, well, Gordon probably was pulling his hair out. We had all sorts of things with the planning when we retiled it, but she's got a semi-concrete front apron because there was the army were billeted in there during the Second World War. So there's still the kind of the remnants of the wee posters, you know, like list top, cost sleeves and all that kind of stuff, you know. It's usually quite interesting. So, like most distilleries, they were kind of utilised. I mean, Bowmore had flying boats. She had a squadron of flying boats in it at Bowmore. So, you know, distilleries have been many things over the years.
And just suddenly dawned on me that there are stories like that, because Knockdhu had the Indian army soldiers based there as well, didn't they? From India, I think.
And I bet Gordon was there at the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure Mr. Bruce was wandering out, probably selling them a dram or two.
Well, I wonder, it's maybe something to speak to somebody like Charlie McLean or some of these guys about, but actually the sort of the wartime stories of distilleries and you know, what they were used for and who were based there and stuff like that would be quite an interesting read, actually. Yeah.
It's just about using the utility of the place. I mean, Auchie, because she's triple distilled, she turned her hand to making sanitizer during COVID. Francie and the team were knocking out sanitizer and putting it across Glasgow and further afield. So got skills.
Absolutely. Utilised
history as well. It kind of goes hand in hand with Scottish history, doesn't it? The story of distilling from kind of the 1500s onwards. It's great to kind of tie it in, and so some of these stories like I'm trying to think of was it Jake McCoy was a smuggler, the Canadian smuggler who smuggled whiskey to America during the Prohibition time. So when they opened the case of real Scottish whiskey, they would pour a dram and raise a toast to the real McCoy. So that's where the saying comes from, and all these kind of stuff. It's and why peated whiskey is so popular in America, because Laphroaig was the only bottle you could get during this time, because the chemists would sell it because nobody believed that you would be that stupid to buy something so medicinal.
This cannot be for you know, what was it, the leisurely consumption? This could only be for medicinal purposes. It's interesting though, the whole prohibition bit really gave Scotch production a real positive kick up the ass, because, you know, coming out you know, post First World War, the industry was on its knees really. And it was the best thing ever happened for Scotch was prohibition, because it just opened up a massive export market, and also fundamentally changed the flavours of quite a few. I mean, most of Speyside moved away from lightly peating because they were trying to mimic the sweeter flavours of the kind of American whiskies and the bourbons. But we get some great photographs, like, you know, pictures of teachers going down to the docks in Glasgow and filling up the SS Cynthia, and the boat had, it wasn't just teachers was in there. There was, you know, there was Haig and White Mackay and all that stuff going, and this was unofficial exports at the time, because there was nothing official going in. It was all going to Canada, as you say, coming over the lake into Detroit and places like that. You know. Yeah. But it was the making of the Scotch whisky. It created another impetus for Scotch, you know.
And then a big demand for it as well.
A few lucky breaks is one of these things that seems to be quite a regular trend. I mean, you've got the phylloxera beetle as well in the wine industry, and there's always seems to be a kind of lucky break story within.
Absolutely, but it's also innovation. You've got to take advantage when things come to you. So the guy that built Ardmore was Adam Teacher, William's son. William had died in 1876, which is a very sad year for us Glaswegians, because that's also when our football team was founded, Partick Thistle. So a lot of people cried that year. And Adam, he was a great sailor.
Partick Thistle nil, that's right, yeah.
He was there's Andy Caldwood. My God, I haven't seen Andy for a while. He's a Bishop Briggs loon like myself. How you doing, Andy? So he took it. He was a great sailor, and the next time you're over, I will show you. There was one of the teacher's history books that tells you all about how he took two vessels, two barks out of Glasgow, out of the Clyde, and took them down to South America, chasing guano. they thought guano was going to be the new way of powering distilleries, gaslighting, and what cities gaslighting, corporation gaslight. So it's just a lot of it's not terribly PC. The things that they were doing with guns and shooting things, but he went away down there, and of course, great sailor. It kind of came on to the idea of why are we putting ballast into the bottom of boats? When I worked at Allied down at Dumbarton, one of my pals that I used to work with, he had a boat. He stayed around at Clondon. As you come out of the loch, just by where the submarine's going, actually, it's very narrow because there's big banks of slate, which the clippers were coming up the Clyde had to have that in the bottom of their boats to keep them stable out in the high seas. But they had to get a shallower draft to get up towards the upper Clyde, up towards Glasgow itself. So they would chuck all this stuff out. They go, they're just needing weight. Okay, I'll give them casks. So teachers were loading casks of whiskey into the bilges of the boat. They were then going out way down through the Atlantic, around the bottom at the tip of Good Hope, across the Indian Ocean, into Melbourne, into Sydney. Casks were going on the quayside for 6 months, and then the next boat going back was taking these stuff back. And that was actually, we've got a couple of bottles at Ardmore, we'll show you, Australia bonded. This was free maturation in the high seas. I guess it's just innovation like that, the self-opening cork again. Yeah. I'm not just blowing teachers. I know teachers because it's a business I'm in, invented by our industry. It wasn't invented by a guy doing wine or cognac. It was a grandson of William Teacher that invented the self-opening cork. It's innovation, when you've got industrious people like we have in Scotland and in the industry, and then, as you say, somebody gives you an opportunity like phylloxera or prohibition, you've got to have the get up and go and the gumph to make the most of it.
Isn't it, the ability to react is key, and a lot of guys did that with prohibition. Is kind of prohibition with COVID lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it was almost like somebody turned on the virtual switch, and everyone was online doing things like this, which kind of really got a lot of people through it. With virtual tastings and all that.
And in a way, it's been really positive, Mike, because it's created a lot more interest. So I think you have seen consumers who are now really keen to find out, on face to face and at the places that you can go and see the people that you've been introducing. You've been introducing them to the bottles, into the liquid. Now they want to go and see how it's actually made and go and do a bit more exploring. So I definitely think it was a tough time to go through. You really felt it in the retail sector, but hopefully we're bouncing out of it really strongly. We've created a wee bit of a buzz, and then, as I say, all the guys that are out there innovating with startup distilleries and just creating a breadth again, a breadth of experience, a breadth of flavour. Yeah, because we started to channel a very narrow territory as an industry in the last 20, 30 years. So it's good to see it expanding back out again.
Definitely, yeah. And Russell touched on the kind of the FOMO movement of all these new bottles, but I think certainly with the new distilleries, we're seeing that kind of plateauing.
Starting to slow down.
Yeah, Ardmore and these kind of guys, it's on the shelf now, whereas before they were all gone. Certainly they're single cast or limited releases, these kind of things will fly. But these guys are now sitting on stock that is going to be core. It's going to be available. And that gives us the chance to kind of talk about it and sell it and kind of do what I like to think we do best and get it into people's hands. And
it looks a little bit like auction prices seems to have slowed down a bit as well, which I think is going to help that kind of situation. We're going to get more of a chance to actually get our hands on these bottles to drink, and places like Royal Mile Whiskies giving their allocations away to pubs so that they'll open them up and sell them by the dram instead of letting people buy the bottles, and lots of innovations like that really kind of help to make it more accessible, and because it's for drinking. Ultimately that's what it's for. Whiskey's for drinking.
Aye, it certainly is. It is. My father collected miniatures. He had about 1,400 miniatures, but he never collected big bottles. He drank big bottles. Very few of them in the house.
1,500. Wow, that's.
Yeah. There was it was grim in our house because he used to check them every year religiously, and the apocryphal story, because I was just a babe in arms. I've got two older brothers, and if Andy Calderwood had flashed up earlier on, still on, he's kind of ages with my two brothers, and I think Andrew would be about 7 and Jim was 9, and my dad had been up doing his checks, going through his wee ledger, and found a few had been cracked open, one half full. So, okay. Boys have been into these, right? So come down and said, Jim, you've been touching touch with no, okay. Andrew was, no, not me, big ready, So he knew it was Andrew, but he wouldn't admit it. So he poured the rest into a glass and said, "There you go, Andrew. Why don't you just have a wee drink?" And oh no, Dad, it was far too burny the first time. No, a few of them evaporated when they were in my presence as well. I have to say that they were quite handy evaporating. But, yeah. There's great interest. I used to love the miniature scene. You could that was basically our away days. Was a run up to Aberfoyle or up to Oban, down to Girvan and places. Anywhere that was at the whiskey miniature shops, Dad would go in and a wee peruse through. It was a great way of getting my knowledge of the industry up.
Yeah.
I knew most of the names before I started. So it was fantastic.
The rascals here.
But I must admit, I'm not a massive fan of just hoarding big bottles. I do like to see a bottle getting drunk.
Yeah.
I like to see it being savoured.
Absolutely, yeah. I know I've been known to pitch a wee dram at my dad's miniature collection a few years ago as well. So I guess every young one did it when they were.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying it out for the first time.
It was these lethal cocktails you used to make by taking a wee drop out of everything so that they wouldn't notice there was anything missing.
And then it was,
Jesus, like whiskey, Bacardi, vodka, gin, and then off you'd go at the women's school disco with this. I mean, yeah, Jesus Christ.
The Chateau Paralytic, yeah. A pint of electric soup, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Phyllis, what was your first? Can you actually remember your first kind of drams, or what was the first dram that really stuck out in your mind?
The first malt whiskey, first Scottish malt whiskey got me, it was Dalwhinnie 15.
Nice.
Before that, I was a Jameson's and a heap of ice. We always end up, whenever we're out in Aberdeen, we'd end up in O'Donoghue's Irish bar, and felt we'll have to drink Irish stuff. So I was like, okay, but like a pint of Guinness. And we washed it out with a chaser at Jameson's. There was one night they ran out of ice, and we were like, "Oh, we're gonna have to drink it neat." And started neat. And was like, "Actually, it's all right. It's not that we're probably half bile at the time, but it was all right." So my job, my next job was working at a local hotel, and it was involved kind of doing the drink choice for kind of the restaurant, and we took in some of the classic malts, and the Dalwhinnie 15. I was like, actually, that's pretty good.
Really elegant, isn't it? So it's a lovely dram.
Yeah. And that kind of opened the door of Scotch neat and Scottish. So that was my one. So that will always have a kind of wee place for me. Yeah.
Russell, you mean yours?
Yeah, I think my. I mean, I didn't drink whiskey a lot in my younger years. Well, I was well into adulthood before I bought my first kind of bottle, because I was put off. My dad was a Bells and a Grouse, and I was brought up in the Highlands, so New Year back then used to last for a fortnight, and within that, the party would just roll on. So inevitably, there would be a couple of nights it was in our house, and I loved it. It was great as a kid. You were up all night and you out playing with your mates in the dark, and nobody told you to go to bed and all sorts. It was brilliant. But I used to get up in the morning and kind of maybe clear some of the stuff out of the road so I could play in the living room. And you'd pick up the glass and go, "What the fuck? That is disgusting." So I've always had that kind of long-lasting notion of what whiskey kind of was. And even as an adult, when I played darts just in the pub, not so much for teams, but the idea you stayed on the board until somebody knocked you off, and it was always for a nip. I would always take something like vodka and coke because I just wanted a pint, because I wasn't really drinking it. Just because I thought I can't drink all these pints, because I was doing not bad at the time. It was never ever whiskey. Mm-hmm. And then when I got older, I thought I should really get into whiskey. So I would see things like Lagavulin on offer in the supermarket at the time. Lagavulin 16, for goodness sake. Tesco especially, you can hardly get the stuff just now. Mm-hmm. And I kind of got into that a little bit, and I kind of enjoyed it, but there was a bit of me thinking, this isn't right. And I was kind of working away, and it wasn't until I won a few bottles of whiskey in a football dream team league. One of these things with a mini league, everybody had to put a bottle of Scotch up for the prize, and I won it one year. And there was a bottle of Tomatin Legacy, in there, and that kind of lovely sponge cake fruitiness and all these kind of things. I thought, wow, wait a minute, this is different to that kind of smoky stuff I've been chewing my way through for the last 2 or 3 years. And that was a game changer for me. And then the next one that completely, absolutely took me on the journey was I bought the Glen Garioch 12. That I won as well again back in Billy's days with Glen Garioch. And that was it. I was like, whoa, okay, right, this is a different world. I need to go and explore stuff here. And it just took off from there. And then obviously getting the job in the shop 3 years ago after I finished with the NHS. My car was kind of going along like that, and then it just went woof. So yeah, just kind of exploded with all the availability of what's out there. So I would say Lagavulin is probably my first experience, but I would still drink it, but not my favourite experience. It didn't put me off for life, like some people talk about. A very heavy peated one does that. But getting into the fruitier stuff really changed things completely, and that was what won me over, for sure.
Yeah, I do. Glendronach's really underrated. It's not underrated now, but it was underrated for many years. It's a wonderful dram.
Yeah.
The only other, my last memory before I kind of through the various moves and sell-offs. The last time I was at Glendronach, because it used to be teachers owned it in the 60s, and then it was an Allied. Having heard all the stories about the Healing Coups, with Frank Massey saying, we had to stop production one night and go and help pull the calf out, help it calving. My last job, the last time I was there, was to help shoe about 50 sheep from down the side of the Glen House, back down in front of the warehouse and across the road, because it's getting out the fence. No, you don't get this in other industries, eh? No. Tight tools, we're away to move some sheep,
When you said you're ready to shoe some sheep, I was like, surely you should.
That's what I thought as well.
You can tell I'm a city boy. Yeah, that's a technical term. Shoe.
Putting these shoes on a sheep. I do like. I'm always a fan of just going a little bit off piste with you. You're talking about the guys who maybe first experienced with a Lagavulin or a Laphroaig or something and could put them off whiskey for life. Sometimes it's the best way to try it, because you have somebody who's never tried whiskey before, and probably more in the bar than in the shop. But try a wee Laphroaig and see what you think of that. If they like it, then outstanding. If they hate it, then you could be like, well, everything else is going to taste absolutely banging compared to that.
Well, this is a true story. My father, the first time he had whiskey, he was just back from Germany from doing his national service. And he was in a bar in Glasgow, round the corner from where my granny stayed, the Snaffle Bit. For those who know Glasgow know the Snaffle Bit. It's the same bit as the Park Bar. And my grandfather had got my dram, and it was a Laphroaig, and my dad said to me, he says, if that's whiskey, you can keep it. And then of course he had a love for it thereafter. But aye, if you start with something like a Lagavulin or a Laphroaig, there's really only one way.
Yes.
It's back the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I'm not sure what's happening with my camera, because I've got a torch shining in my face here and it's not actually lighting anything up at all. So I don't know what's. My computer must be dying.
All right. Okay.
It's wondering what on earth I'm doing drinking coffee and Pepsi Cola. I think that's the problem.
It doesn't realize you're in work mode.
I look like one of those snitches in a mafia expose. I was thinking that myself.
You guys doing another academy? When's your next academy?
September, first week of September, and then we're going to kind of sit down and look at dates for probably the next 2 years, get them cemented in so that we can get going. You'll know Kat from Glen Garioch, do you?
I see that. Yes.
Oh,
a bit of a hard time there.
To Ardmore as well, we were there. So.
Yeah.
So it was Kat that posted a picture of Roderick in front of his granddad at the distillery too. That's where I saw that.
Brilliant. Aye. Some of the things you almost throw out again. This is one that Gordon. Remember, we were gutting Glen Garioch when she was getting done up. I think that was about 2003, and I'm going to struggle to remember the chap's name. The guy who wrote the Quiet American. He used to be not the Quiet American, the Quiet Man. He was an exciseman. And he used to he did the distilleries. It was Dallas Dew and it was Glen Garioch in the stills in that kind of foresty area. And there was a door with his writing on the back of it. It was almost like his graffiti, as it were. And it was going into the skip. And I think it was Gordon or one of the other guys said, "Oh, you can't do that. You need to get this back out. That guy's really famous." That was exciting when he went on to write,
James
that's the
Carroll.
one.
Yeah.
That's the one. Aye. So we had to get the bloody thing back out the skip and put it aside. I don't know what we've done, whatever happened to it, but it was going into the skip and you're going,
yeah, history.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how much history was thrown out just without thinking,
I know.
Yeah.
for progress, updating things and revamping things and refurnishing. It's just a door, chuck it out. Yeah.
I know. I think that's what I love about Ardmore. You can go up into the old barley loft and there's a Morton's wort cooler sitting there. You think, oh, I've only ever seen one of them before, and that was up at Edwardour, and it was a PD one. This is a big one.
Yeah.
I think it helps
there is a picture of that in Ian's book.
You probably have one.
In your dark wee corner there, so that's on the
I know.
You go.
I don't know what's going on with the cat because the torch is there. It's shining on me, but I've got a light. No, I don't know what's happening. It got brighter for a second. It must be the camera.
It might be you're too far away from the. See, you're brightening up again.
Yeah. So there's the Morton cooler. Yeah.
That's a chappy.
Yeah.
So it's a wee bit big on the one at Edwardour, but yeah, I think it helped when you had. That's what happens when you have takeovers and stuff, and it's you lose stuff. So it helps when you've had distilleries that are maybe being in ownership or single ownership or family ownership, because you tended not to throw things away. You kept stuff just in case.
Yeah. You hoarded them.
Yeah.
I find I used to do that one day.
Especially if the guys were engineers that were kind of involved in operating the place, because they're dreadful. They just keep everything.
Plugs and batteries and cables.
That's like your dad's kind of cover. That's kind of it's a man drawer, isn't it? You've got that kind of
man drawer. Yeah.
Man drawer. What's his name? The comedian spoke about that with the drachma. You've got batteries that are don't work anymore and currency from different countries and stuff like that.
Yeah. Might come back.
Don't exist anymore. Francs and pesetas and these kind of things.
Michael McIntyre does an absolutely brilliant sketch about that kind of situation when you never know. You've got like a takeaway menu from the Chinese that closed 20 years ago. You've got drachma, you've got old batteries, you've got keys for the shed of the house that you used to live in 2 years ago, all that kind of stuff. And then somebody turns up at your door with that exact scenario, and you're like,
Got that.
We've got from the pub, the Black Bull Inn we have in Inverary as well. We've still got the original door keys, and it's a key. It's about that big, and kind of the handles about that, big chunky key. But the door got destroyed, kicked out a long time ago. But we kept the key because why not? Somebody might need it sometime.
You just never know. That's it. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. Right.
How old's the Black Bull? Because that must have been there for.
It's one of the oldest pubs in Inverary. I think we've traced it back 100. Well, when we bought it, 2007, it was in the same family for 157 years. It was Drovers in before that, but we don't know how long. So it's at least 170 years. It's 15 years this year since we bought it. So there are maps with it on it. The oldest pub we know of was actually across the green, kind of if you know Inverary at all, where Westfield Gardens is.
Yeah.
A brewer and a bar there.
Okay.
And that goes back to the early 1800s. It's not there now, obviously. It's all houses and stuff now. But there's us in the commercial, and then the Banks of Uri at the other side of town. That's the three oldest in the town. So I don't think we are the oldest, but we're certainly one of the oldest.
Yeah. Okay, you're talking about Ian did a lot of research into extinct distilleries in the northeast. He had the one that was traced down just really across the road, Duffy Park, side of the Duffy Park, facing onto the old
The Davana one, or was
Aberdeen
it?
prison. Yeah,
Was that the Davana one?
Davana, yeah. No, was that Davana?
Davana,
was that not the one that was up next to the paper mill? Or was Davana Davana one just on the D?
There was Bonaccord, which was on just at Holborn Street, around about where the Malt Mill pub is. That was where Bonaccord was. Davana was down maybe closer to the railway. So there was another one, was it Strathdee or something like that?
Jeremy
Strathdee, yeah. I think it was Jeremy Strathdee,
yeah. And I haven't read it for a while. It's only a copy I've got of Hastings. It's not an original Barnard, but I've just loved his. I can't quite remember it verbatim, but what he said when he was travelling over to Jericho. I think he'd been at Glendronach, Glengarioch.
Yeah.
It was the most it was godforsaken coach journey he'd ever been on in his life, across this place. You can just imagine going across Colby in a full day,
in a horse and cart, yeah.
I would love to see Jericho. I think the story of the priest starting it with his sons, and it would have been a pretty special wee place.
Yeah. Wee project for you boys.
The malt barns.
Well, absolutely. Well, Ian took a picture. There's a photograph of his in the book. What's it called again? The Lost Distillery one. Distilleries Lost or something like that, or Scotch Lost or something.
Scotch Mist.
No, Scotch Mist. Yes, that's it. MISSED. Yeah, that's right. So there's a photograph of just the wall of the barn, which was part of the distillery, which is really all that is left. I think the farmer kind of chases you away if you go anywhere near there now. So it's not.
You got fed up with whiskey hunting and down.
I tell you, I still dine out on it, and everybody that works in our company has seen the pictures. Ian did his book in the Mamuris over in Transylvania. He travelled out there in the 60s when he was a student and went back. It's just got wonderful photographs, wonderful images. But he did a lot on their distillation there, obviously making stuff like kind of apples and stuff, and the local hooch. And some of the pictures are just brilliant. We've got all this modern regulations, ATEX and Desir, and they say in there, it's literally just a 2-piece alembic. They lift it off and they pour in the apple slop, put the copper back on, sealing it with dough. And then the wee woman sitting at the corner like that with the bicycle wheel, she's got the rummager. She's just kind of sitting there, and they've got just a coal fire, a timber fire under it. And to get the cut point, the boy he just lights a match, gets a lit flame, and just sets the still in fire. And if it still goes up and it's a nice light, pale, opaque blue, oh well, that's a spirit cut. Start collecting it now, I could probably not get away with that nowadays in Scotland. But just great images, and of course the whole story is in the faces of the people, So probably one of the last, as Ian was saying, it's probably the last unspoiled part of Europe. They really live life in a traditional way, make the most of what they've got. But boy, you can read it in their faces,
Yeah. He gave me a sample, or he gave me a drink of something. He came into the shop one day, and he gave me a drink of some stuff, and he said, taste this, and it was really nice. It tasted very whiskey-like, and it was very, very drinkable. And of course, he got, what is it? I thought, black whiskey. He said, no, this was the stuff he got from the guy in Romania. He said he's actually quite talented, but I wouldn't trust him with your family. I thought, okay. He said, this guy's just really weird. He said, I just wouldn't trust him with anything, but he's very talented. Got this kind of yeah. So some of the characters he must have met over there, and that was all on the back of winning a. Again, we go back to that fortune, that stroke of luck. He won a moped in a prize, and took off to Europe as a teenager. Mm-hmm. I think that was the name of his first book. I think, wasn't it? The Year I Won a Moped or something. Was his first,
I don't know. Never knew
his first photography book. Yeah. So it's back to that kind of fortune thing,
Yeah. His first book we get involved with, he was doing. I've got it behind me. It's the Bottled History. As he said, it was one for a coffee table. It needs to be a big bloody coffee table.
Yes, it's a sizable book.
because they're beautiful big images. They're
Yeah.
full plate images, and he'd come in and he'd gone into that point number 3. This would be, I don't know, just after or before, maybe just after being taken over. And Ardmore was needing a bit of TLC, and she wasn't fully stocked. But we were growing wonderful big mushrooms inside this. So that was what Ian was really interested in, was the fungi and stuff, you know. But he's got a wonderful eye for photography. We used to do little things for the Spirit of Speyside Whisky Festival. Was it whiskey shots we used to call it, and maybe 8 or 9 people, just like you guys do with your whiskey tours, really intense. We come down for photographers, and Ian would take them in, and we'd give them free access to anybody who wanted to go into the distillery. Ian would do a wee masterclass, show them some techniques, colour, light, what to go for. Each person got a guide, and they could just access all areas, and then come back, and then we would do a tasting, and then we would do a few original drams. But some of the images we've got are just stunning.
Yeah.
Especially people had never been into a distillery before, had no concept really of traditional distillery photographs, and you get the amazing blooms and auras coming off of copper taken just at the right angle.
Yeah.
And you know, bits and pieces of the decision going, shit, is that my distillery?
Yeah. Somebody take these things for granted, don't you, as well, when you work in a place like that. You forget sometimes you forget the kind of beauty of things.
Yeah.
See, in Bottle's history, he also did. He spoke to a lot of the old retired guys as well, didn't he? And
Yes.
was it Ardmore, the story about the guys that were in the mash tun cleaning when somebody inadvertently switched it on?
Oh,
and
I can't remember.
The rake started going round, and although it was going quite slowly, they still had to move with the rakes.
Like a swivel door. They were just walking around.
They were shouting for somebody.
Sounds like a cunning plan to get people more productive.
Like the ultimate exercise treadmill. The first treadmill was
Oh, brilliant. I'll need to reread it again. I'd forgotten all about that one.
But I think all these stories, Billy Connolly was always my favourite. That just telling everyday stories.
Yeah.
That were so funny, but the reason they were funny is because they were true.
With an element of danger to them, like.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, Alistair, that's us at the 2 hour mark, and I know we always say it's going to be about an hour, but we won't lie to ourselves when we say it's going to be an hour.
Yes, we do kind of lie, don't we? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks very much. I mean, the stories. I hope the guys at home have loved the stories, and and your input there. It's been absolutely fantastic. We've gone from very geeky, technical maturation process to some great stories as well. So, thank you very much for giving up your time tonight and joining us. And I dare say we could stay on for another 2 hours and reminisce a little bit more, but.
We'll do part 2.
Seems a shame not to now. Russell's back into the light now. He's got the light back.
He's come clean.
Oh, listen, thanks very much for inviting me along, fellas. It's been a blast. I can't believe it's 2 hours. I wasn't really following the time, so
it's nice when you're having fun. But we'll need to get you back on again sometime else. So we've been doing this for almost a year and a half, well over a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And lots of people like yourself, just wonderful storytellers, and it's always a case you think, gosh, we could carry on another couple of hours, and we always need to do a part 2. So I've got a list of people to contact for part 2. So we'll definitely get you on the list for that as well.
Yeah. Well, look forward to seeing you back at the still, and if next time I go to Glen Garioch, I'll need to just nip in by actually. I've not actually been in the shop for a wee while, so certainly.
You'll have to ping us your address to send the cold rain down to as well.
Oh no, I'll come and get it. Don't worry, I'll be at your door.
2 bottles.
Brilliant. Okay, fellas, listen.
Thanks very much, Alistair. Thank you guys for joining in, asking your questions, and asking all the questions and putting the comments in. It's been fantastic. It makes it all the more special when you guys get interactive as well.
Absolutely.
So please keep it up.
Sure.
Who's next week, Russell?
Next week we have got Gary Dunsire from the East City Whisky Club, which some of you may or may not be members of. This was a whiskey club I got involved with during lockdown. They're based in Glasgow, east end of Glasgow, obviously, and just one of these random groups that you kind of hooked up with during lockdown, which ended up being a screen full of best mates that I'd never actually physically met. Most of which I still haven't, but Gary's kind of in charge of that, and he's out and about doing tastings in person in Glasgow now. So I think they've got some nights or some days and afternoons ahead in the Glen Scotia Bar, or just the Scotia Bar?
Scotia.
So yeah, would love to get down there some nights. So we'll maybe find more about that from Gary next week. And then the following week, we've lined up Callum Fraser from Glenfarclas. So
lock up your daughters and batten down the hatches. I can't believe they managed to steal anything out of Glenfarclas when Callum's around. You know?
Yeah,
they're very lucky thieves that didn't bump into him. That's all I can say.
they might. Yeah, I think they've caught. Did they not catch?
Oh, did they? Oh, brilliant!
Did I hear? Maybe not. Maybe not. We'll maybe find out.
Yeah, no, that'd be good news if they caught them. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure I heard. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah,
I think we're going to spread false hope. But yeah, Alistair, thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next week, or in the shop, or wherever we see you. I hope you enjoy your whiskey and have a great weekend.
Yep, absolutely.
Cheers, guys. Good night.
Cheers, guys.